5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back.
Thanks for joining us.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Third time's a charm, baby.
So we thank you all for being here with us. I hope that you guys are enjoying the videos. We're going to have some more content as we continue to grow and evolve. We're still working on names for the channel, so if anyone has any comments, please let us know.
Right now we're thinking about Cancer Rising Revolution. We have Stop Your Whining right now. We have Why Not. What was the other one we had? Cosmic? No, not Cosmic.
The Healing Revolution.
Healing Revolution. Cancer Rising to Rise Up. No, there's too many risings. Unless you like it, let us know. Comment below.
Today we want to talk about spiritual awakenings. Nixie, how's your spiritual awakening going? So today we're going to talk about a little bit of spiritual awakenings. We're actually going to be very vulnerable and share our spiritual awakenings, right, with everyone. And we were just talking a little bit about this before the show. What is a spiritual awakening? And I said that I don't really think you can define it. I think you have to experience it, right? What was what we were saying?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to concepts and defining things, think about it. Like, who defines what at the end of the day?
Right.
At the end of the day, you have to experience something, because you can verbalize something all you want, but if you're verbalizing it, you're already limiting it into a construct of the mind. And a spiritual awakening, you can't even put it in words. I mean, you can, but it doesn't give you the full spectrum of the actual experience.
So let's do this for the people on camera here or at home or watching this. We're going to define what we felt our spiritual awakening is, just so that you can see the difference in that. I don't really think there is a definition of it. I mean, the obvious definition is that you're coming into some type of awakening of the self or the soul, right? But how it really doesn't have, I don't feel like, a definition, because it can be so personal to each person. And you were even saying before this, you said something about the self.
Yeah, so my definition, like if I could define a spiritual awakening, I would say in the simplest terms, it's literally one's own awakening to another layer of their own essence. And like Christina was saying, like everyone has their own experience, everyone has their own definition, their own perspective on a spiritual awakening. And with that being said, because I also believe that everything in life is perspective, I don't believe that anyone's definition of a spiritual awakening is wrong, because at the end of the day, we're here in a human body having a temporary experience through our soul, right? And so a spiritual awakening can be an infinite number of experiences, but
right.
I ultimately think it's honestly because you can have multiple spiritual awakenings in a lifetime here on earth. So I feel like it's just honestly just like an onion, like just another awakening, a shedding of another layer of your being.
Well, and I think you do have many spiritual awakenings. That's the thing, is like this spiritual awakening's this one big thing that everybody talks about, but it's not. It's a constant evolution or growth of your soul is what I would define it as for myself. And it comes with challenges, and when you're going through those challenges, those moments can feel like awakenings. For other people, I think they just have these moments, although I think they were going through challenges. I would imagine most people are when they're moving through a spiritual awakening. But some people have defined it as like near-death experiences that they've had. Other people would say like that they noticed Kundalini energy is what I've heard from people with spiritual awakenings. Mine was completely different. I already was into God and into spirituality. I was actually mad at God at the time, and that's when I had my spiritual awakening. So, and I feel like after that I've had other ones too, kind of like challenges that create that stuff to like evolve or expand and rise through our soul, really through our soul awareness.
And she wants to come to you. This is Nixie, by the way.
She's never on the show.
She wants to come to her mommy. She's an Aquarius, so she's usually aloof. It's usually Nora. Nora's right here. Nora's actually pretty calm, which is very rare as a Leo. She's usually dying to be on set, but
as soon as you said her name, Nora.
Nora.
Nora has a question about spiritual awakenings.
So, and to what you were saying about like other people's definitions of spiritual awakenings, your own experience about spiritual awakenings, it clearly, just by that, it's multidimensional. It's not just thought, it's not just experience, it's literally just every aspect of our being.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, it's very multidimensional. It's an actual experience. It's literally just an uncovering. I feel like there's some people, depending on how their spiritual awakening goes and what they're experiencing, like you were saying, some people have near death, some people just are angry, you know. I feel like it's more of it's honestly just perspective. I feel like everything comes down to perspective, because some people can have a spiritual awakening, and in that moment, or even in the days following, they don't even know it's a spiritual awakening. Or they wouldn't even call it a spiritual awakening.
And I think most people don't know, right? Until, this is why we're having this conversation, is a lot of people don't know. They think that like something is going chaotic in their life, so they're having like a tower moment, and then something with clarity or more. And I think that's part of spiritual awakening too, is like there's some type of challenge or pitfall, and then there's some type of clarity or understanding of something deeper. That's really what I would define spiritual awakening as. So I think that's when people are starting to wonder, like, okay, what is this? And I've noticed a lot of people that come that talk about spiritual awakenings when I'm doing like classes and stuff. Nobody really has expressed it in that way. They're like, oh, okay, now I know what a spiritual awakening is. Once we talk about stuff like Kundalini energy, or like mine was so different that mine was so hard for me to relate to other people. Like when people talked about spiritual awakenings, I never even said I had one because of the way it happened.
See, and you know, that's another thing. Like, you'll come to find out I have so many Virgo placements. So Virgo is ruled by Mercury and is a very detail-oriented sign. And so I love to philosophize. And so when I just hear people talk and when I hear other perspectives, it literally just opens up a door, like a whole Pandora's box of questions and also realizations and insights. And so when you're saying that, literally what I was able to like hone in on is the one commonality from what Christina was saying and from what other people have shared with her, and just me listening to other people's spiritual awakenings, is that the one commonality is that there's a challenge or like a breaking down for there to be a breakthrough.
Right.
And so if you think about that, it kind of goes back to what I said about shedding another layer like an onion to uncover ourselves. So then if you want to take it a step deeper, it's almost like even in Buddhism, they talk about, you're really just like in meditation, right? You're not meditating to just get to some state or to get something or to experience something or get transcendental, whatever the case may be. All these expectations that we have, like this just acquisitive nature that we have, it's a letting go instead.
Right.
Because we already are the infiniteness. We already are source here incarnate in a human body. So if you think about it, if we let go of all the stuff that's blocking, we see more of what we truly are.
So point being is, I don't think the spiritual awakening the point of this is really that important. I think we've made that more of a trend. I hate to say that, but I feel like that's like, not that it's not valid for certain people, and I'm not trying to unvalidate that, but I think for people who feel like they haven't had one, I just think that that's okay too. Like,
it
don't feel like you're not evolving if you don't feel like you've ever had a spiritual awakening.
I think it's become a trend because it's become easy for humans, unfortunately, the lower expressions of our humanity, because we are in a dual world, to prey on our acquisitive nature of always trying to get something.
Yeah.
And so people who, are, then maybe they're not coming from a bad place or anything like that, but what if their intention is like, you know what? I want to follow the trend because I want to make money because I'm struggling right now and I want to survive.
Right.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. We do live in a very complex reality where we do have to survive. We do have to make money. We do have to make ends meet to be able to survive and live the lifestyle that we want to live. And so for those people, I feel like, who prey on that acquisitive nature, it's easy for them to hop on that trend. For those who aren't spiritually awakened, or who aren't on a different part of their journey, and there's no judgment and there's no right or wrong, good or bad, better, or worse, but it's easier for them to prey on those people who are seeking answers, who are seeking to get something because they feel like it's going to make them happier, wealthier, more successful, more prosperous, because ultimately that's what people want in life, is to be happy, to feel joy. They want all the things, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the one thing is that it all comes from within, not externally. And that's a whole nother topic in and of itself.
And what you're saying is, in seeking, right? Part of seeking is, I think there's going to be deception in that, because you're seeking of yourself. So you're learning about yourself. So, and that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing to be seeing that, because that's how you learn and grow and know more about yourself, right? Is in certain things that are deceptive, or when you're seeking and you're learning about yourself, it's not going to just be everything's going to be what you expect it to be. And that's a good thing, because that's how you grow and start to trust yourself in that place. So anyways, back to the spiritual awakening part of it. I think that we wanted to share ours, or what we consider, because I guess I never really, now thinking about this, even talking about it with you, I never thought about it. I never really feel like I per se had a spiritual awakening. When you ask me that question, I guess I have a point where I can think back to that felt like something like that. So what I would tell people is, maybe in this conversation with us, that they'll see that they've already had that energy, and you don't have to call it a spiritual awakening. You can if you want to, but I think it'll allow people to maybe see that they've maybe already, most of us probably have already had it, we're just not even aware of it.
Right. I think one thing to remember, or to keep in mind when it comes to all things spirituality, is to not get so hung up on labels and names. Because at the end of the day, like I mentioned earlier, like when you're talking, like literally language is literally limiting. Like, who made language? Who made words, right? So we don't want to get hung up on the words. They're there as a tool to help us wrap our minds to make sense of certain things that are intangible, that are infinite, if you think about it. How else are we going to get messages out and talk about things?
Well, another good point. How are we going to get messages? That part of being awoken or more open is that, right? Is when you're more open to messages. And I think when you start to go through some of these transitional points in your life, or spiritual awakening points in your life, you're just more open, really. That's what it's providing you, is being more open to the signs that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So in saying this, do we want to go into our spiritual awakenings? Okay.
Letting the wine breathe.
So
wine is spiritual, see?
Back into our spiritual awakening. So we wanted to share with you guys some vulnerability stuff about us, just to talk about some of the things we've been through, and the spiritual awakening was the main thing we had thought about. So we're going to talk a little bit, each one of us, about what we kind of went through in our spiritual awakening, or just our spiritual upgrade, or whatever you want to call it. So mine was probably, how old was I? Gosh, so long ago. I feel like since then I've actually had probably another one, now that we're talking about this too. But my probably biggest realization of spirituality, it was interesting because I was already following God, right? I went to Catholic school, so I was already a believer in God and Jesus and all that stuff. And I was actually dating somebody for 7 years, and there was a very, very terrible point in our relationship. Not from the person, but the situation that was involved, where the person I was with for 7 years that I thought I was supposed to marry had gotten sent to prison. So in that moment, I was very angry with God. So this would be completely different than a lot of spiritual awakenings I've heard, but I guess this would be what you would call, for me, a spiritual awakening. In that moment, when I was so mad at God, I wanted to seek within myself more insight and information, because I wanted to know why this was happening to me. Like, what did I do to deserve this? What did I do to have to face this challenge that was, to me at the time, was life shattering. It felt like I had my whole life planned, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, bloop, your whole life's going to change. You have no control over this.
How long were you together before that happened?
Who?
How long were you and this person together before they got sent to prison?
We were together for 7 years. So it was like we were planning to be married and to have a family, and I had this whole layout of how my life was supposed to look, right? You know, like this whole expectation of how it was going to go. And then right then and there, it was like a bomb was dropped onto my life about this is not the plan, and now this person's going to prison, and you might never see them again. Because at the time, they were actually going to be deported because they weren't living in the United States. They were living in the United States, but they weren't a citizen. So it was like the universe or God had ripped apart my whole world, and I was angry. I was like, I don't believe in this stuff anymore. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in whatever, because I was so mad. Well, little did I know that was going to be like the path where I went down, and I started like seeking so much stuff about myself that in that I started to seek more into spirituality, which it's interesting because it eventually took me back to God. But it was like I wanted to know things about myself and why that this was happening in my life. So it was like as I started to seek other avenues and resources, like started doing things like yoga and researching books on like self-care practices and meditation. And there was actually some books in there about God too, because I think I was so mad at God. I wanted to know why I was mad at God in a sense. So in that time, it was like all this stuff was like unraveling in my life, completely falling apart the way I wanted it to be. But little did I know that it was actually setting me up for what I was supposed to be doing.
Do you feel like, because what's coming through for me, like when I hear you talk about your spiritual awakening, one thing that I find in common too with my spiritual awakening, which by the way, when I talk about it, it's completely different than Christina's. But what we have in common is this energy and this essence of wanting to seek truth and wanting answers. Like, what is the truth?
I think that's the biggest piece, was the wanting to know what the truth was.
Do you also feel like, because you also mentioned that you felt like, you know, it was like basically a shattering of your world because you had this whole plan thought out, you wanted to be with this person, your life and all of that. Do you feel like this also in essence like shattered your ego as well? Like your identity of what you thought was?
I think it shattered my identity of a thought. At that time, I don't think I thought it was an ego thing, right? Like I was young. I was probably, gosh, how old was I? I was like mid-20s, late 20s. So I don't even think I thought about it in that way at the time. I just thought like, this is ruining the life I had planned for myself, right? Like it was a comfortable life in a way, like, because when I think about it, after that, things got really challenging. There was a lot of challenges. Not that I hadn't had challenges in life before, but these were different challenges. These are challenges that was like making me self-reflect a lot more, if that makes sense. So in that moment, it was like, okay, if I'm going to self-reflect, I need to like dive deep and find out like why this happened to me. I think that was the biggest piece. Why is this happening to me? And then I was like, okay, so if this is happening to me, what am I meant to learn? And that's when I started like diving into all types of different like self-help books, spiritual books, different religions, because I wanted to know like more about that, religions and stuff, like Hinduism, more about like Christianity, Catholicism, all the different type of stuff. So I dove into a lot of that, and in that it was interesting because I started to get like, it was like more insight into why it had happened, why it was part of like the plan, and it wasn't my plan, it was really God's plan or the universe's plan. It just was in that moment, it didn't feel that way, it didn't feel good, it felt like shit.
I know spiritual awakenings are not always the funnest, but what I'm also hearing you say is almost like when you had your spiritual awakening, it was more of like the beginning of a journey too.
Yeah,
because that's another thing. I feel like there's this I guess idea that spiritual awakening is just like, oh, flip of a switch, boom, I'm awakened, I'm enlightened, and that's really not like the case. That's not real. That's not how it works.
That's another good point, because it's like a spiritual awakening doesn't have to just be a short period, right? Because now that you're saying that, it was something that was like a long journey for me, and it was like in that moment I was like, wow, this is going to be maybe because I'm Capricorn and we like to make everything difficult. And we're part goat, part like seer, water. Like so I had to like climb the mountain, and as I was climbing the mountain, it wasn't fun. It wasn't, I mean, there was obviously things happening along the way, but in that moment it didn't feel comfortable. So that was hard. That was hard for me to face.
I want to go back to the ego because I really feel like all those things that you're describing are truly ego, and I feel like that's something that we surrender to and let go of more and more and more, especially when you know, not hindsight is 20/20, right? Like that cliche is literally there for a reason because it's true. You know, I mean, you can get clarity in moments, you know, which is honestly a blessing and a miracle in itself. But if you really look back, like prior years and even months, it's a lot more clear.
Yeah.
And so looking back, would you say it was more like a shedding of an ego? Because, you know, you've used words of like a shattering of your life of what was comfort. That's another thing that the ego literally seeks to provide comfort to protect our inner child. And that's when it gets loud and uncomfortable, when there is discomfort and change.
Yeah. I mean, when you say it in that way, yes, I think I saw it more as a evolving of my soul. Because not that the ego is not there, but I just never thought about the ego that much, and that wasn't like, and I'm sure it is part of it, but to me it was always like I was becoming who I was truly meant to be, and that was when I started to realize like, wow, this is incredible. Like my whole life that I had planned, from whatever perspective, the ego part of myself or the maybe even more immature like inner child expectation of, right? Like I was told life should be like marriage and kids, and you have to have all these certain ways that it happens. And in that moment, all of those beliefs again, right? Because the ego goes back to childhood.
So your programming was shattered.
It was shattered. It was ripped. The rug was ripped from underneath me, and it was like, yep, that's not the way it's going to be anymore. So welcome to this new world. But in that, like looking back now, it's like, thank God that stuff happened. Thank God it happened that way. And I think that's too also the human part of us is like, even when you're going on your spiritual journey, spiritual awakening, whatever you call it, is to have that compassion for yourself, because I was definitely so hard on myself, and I don't know if that's Capricorn, but I was like beating myself up. I was beating myself up for like all the things I should have done, or should have done faster, or how much further along on my spiritual journey I should have been, right? So,
and that's why I feel like another thing that I'm thinking about as you're talking is, I think it's important for us to see past the world of appearances, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's like, even though your spiritual awakening is a completely different experience than mine, and as is everyone else's, because everyone here is having their own unique journey here on earth, I think it's important to see past the appearances because it doesn't make anyone else's perspective wrong. And you can also notice common themes within everyone's spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
If you just open up your mind and see past the world of appearances, and you hear what people have to say, and you listen to the words that they're saying, I'm sure we can find commonality in like the same themes in spiritual awakenings. Because at the end of the day, I truly believe that it really is an evolving, like you said, of your soul, which I really like that as well, because that's honestly like another form of, you know, shedding another layer of yourself. Because how do we evolve? You know, we can't stay stagnant. We can't stay stuck in our belief systems and our opinions and what we think is truth.
Well, wouldn't that suck,
you know?
too? I always tell people, if you woke up and you knew you were going to be the same place you were 5-10 years ago, would you be happy? Mm-hmm. Nobody really would, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and that I'd love to hear what yours is, because it'll be interesting that ours are so different.
God.
And then we can bounce back a little bit, because then it'll give you guys kind of an insight to how different our awakenings were. I mean, probably at the time we were these ages, we wouldn't even known that they were spiritual awakenings if we met.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we would have been like, wait, yours doesn't match up to mine.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it's important to be vulnerable. Like, this is not something I really share with a lot of people, because I've never really felt safe to. So it's pretty big for me to share this on YouTube, but I know that the viewers, they're here because they're here for spirituality, and first, even if you're not here for spirituality, you're here for something.
And you might help someone. You always will help someone with your story, right? Even when that's what vulnerability is. It's helping someone else who out there feels the same way, because there's always someone.
Whether it be inspiration, clarity, feeling community, I mean, whatever it is, I feel like people are there for something. And so, so with that, mine was very emotional, very painful. I actually had a really rough childhood growing up. I was very sheltered. I wasn't able to really experience a normal life like most people my generation. I'm a millennial. I'm in my early 30s. And, I do have an old soul, I think, because of that. But my parents, I grew up in a very strict Catholic household. And not a day went by where my dad was yelling and screaming and slamming doors. So I had to do a lot of nervous system healing. I went through a good portion of my life just constantly just on edge and just feeling like the world just wasn't a safe place. And so once I broke free from that, because of the programming, the deep programming that I had and the ancestral trauma of the deep wounding of my parents, which is why they raised me that way. I'm very grateful for how they raised me, even though obviously, it wasn't the most ideal, loving household, but it was the best that they could do with what the consciousness level that they had, and I have that understanding. And I basically attracted relationships from that programming that continued a cycle of abuse and emotional abuse and things of that nature. And so I ended up getting into a relationship. It was actually a really good relationship. It was almost 8 years. It was very karmic. And I say karmic because I feel like it was almost like a karmic debt that needed to be lived out, that I needed to heal the wounds that my parents didn't need to heal. And so it was, I want to say it was like 5 years ago, and it was actually New Year's Day. It just was after midnight. And I got in this really bad argument with my ex. And like I said, we never argue. It was a great, loving relationship. He had communication issues. Well, he finally opened up for the first time after several years of being together. And it was a very transcendental experience, actually. And I'm not one to have like visuals or things like that, although with a lot of years of spiritual practice, it started to open up. But it was a moment where, and mind you, I had no idea what spirituality was. I didn't know I didn't even have self-awareness. I was asleep. I didn't even know what a third eye chakra was. I didn't even know that there was literally a vortex here where my third eye, where my pineal gland is. And after that argument, I was in such deep pain. And finally, when something burst open in him, who knows if he had a spiritual awakening, I don't know, but something within him caused him to communicate for the first time. And as soon as he did, my head involuntarily looked up, and it literally felt like an eyelid was right here in the back of my head, and it opened up, and I gasped for air. I was like, and from that, and I didn't know what it was.
So do you think it's interesting too that in that moment you said that this was a karmic relationship, right? And it was 8 years long. So how important the timing is too of spiritual awakening? Like what Sarah's saying was don't you think that plays such a part? Because if you two weren't together, do you think you would have had that spiritual awakening in that moment with that person?
Right. True. I mean, I'm honestly blessed the way it happened, because if it didn't happen, to be honest, I feel like the universe was giving me a lot of grace and a safe container. I feel like it probably would have been a lot more traumatic, probably like an accident or physical abuse or something, because I come from a lot of very, very deep wounding. And so I feel like I was kind of blessed to have that play out in that way. Mm-hmm. But ever since then, some of the same themes that you had of just, it was literally like a relentless searching for truth. So like I said, I grew up in a very strict Catholic household. Mm-hmm. And I've always believed in God, but
which we have that similarity because we both grew up Catholic, so we always had the belief before even the spiritual awakening.
And I feel like, I don't know, I guess I never knew this, but I guess my soul never really resonated with the fact of God is just this big man upstairs that you just worship and pray to. And I know that can be very triggering for me to say. I do think prayer does have its place and is important. That's obviously another topic. But I always felt like spirituality and some type of spiritual connection is just something that's just naturally inherent within every single one of us, whether you know what it is or not. I feel like everyone can at least resonate like baseline with like there's something within me, or there's just some type of essence that's I can count on, that I can rely on.
Yeah. Well, because I went to Catholic school for between the ages of kindergarten to high school. And people are like, how do you know nothing about the Bible? I feel like my body went asleep. And maybe that was the part. It was like that sleep before. That, like how you said you kind of felt like you were not awake, like you were asleep. And like I don't even remember. I can't tell you anything about the Bible except for Adam and Eve. That's all I know. And I went to Catholic school that long, and we studied the Bible in classes. It's almost like my brain kind of just like put it to the back burner. I was like, nope, we're not going to learn about this. We're just going to ignore this, because not that any religion's bad, but I think it was just meant to be that way, to be able to expand and see all perspectives of religion. So I didn't get stuck on one religion, like one.
I think that's really interesting for you to say, because we talked about this if you saw our last video. The body has such a strong intelligence, more so than the logical mind, and same with the heart. And there's been studies on this, of how intelligent the body and the heart is. And I feel like your body is a big indicator. So and it can be very subtle sometimes. We don't even realize it. Like it can be as simple as like you're talking to somebody and you take a step back, or you're like you feel the need to like cross your shoulders, or I feel like it's a really big indicator of what's truth for you, because it's visceral and it's in your body, and it's literally the vessel of your soul.
Well, like maybe it even remembers from lifetimes ago what religions you already had, or what you served as, or things you did, because I believe in past life too. So I mean, I think about that sometimes, like religion carried over from other lives, or maybe this life I was meant to like suppress it which I believe now, actually sitting here talking about this, I was probably meant to suppress it, right? So I didn't have to believe it or see it. But going back to what you were saying about, because the seeking, right? The truth seeking, which is the whole point of this, right? It's really that seeking more of what did you end up looking or seeking towards? Like how I was seeking certain things, like books and stuff. What did you seek?
So it was honestly very similar, just trying to seek truth. And I mean, it's really more of like personal development, and which is actually quite interesting, because it's like, are they having a spiritual awakening?
I was having a spiritual meltdown. I don't know if that's awakening. I think it's a meltdown.
An exorcism, a breakdown for a breakthrough.
But you were talking about seeking and the truth.
So
and the things you said personal development.
Honestly, one of the things. So obviously, I'm an astrologer, and while I was like reading up on astrology, I didn't even realize that was kind of like an outlet or an avenue of seeking truth, but it actually was, because it ties into your passions. So if you think about your passions and your outlets, it's connected to your heart. So you can't feel that without feeling from your heart. And we have another special guest come up, but
she changed her mind.
Hold on.
The Leo has arrived. I think Nora's still too young for her spiritual awakening. She's not even one yet.
And Leo,
maybe she just came in really awoke.
Who knows? Actually, no. She gonna have a moment.
You gonna have a moment?
She didn't like that. But Leo is ruled by the heart. Leo rules the heart, I mean. So that's actually quite interesting that she came in.
So funny. She loves to be on camera.
But yeah, I feel like your passions also, your heart leads you. So, you have the mind, which you can follow, the logical mind, and then you also have the heart. And I feel like the heart leads you, even in times where you don't even know it's leading you.
Right.
When you have anything that has to do with passion, enjoyment, things that make you feel good, that's your heart leading you. And I think we need to move more towards that. And that's one of the things that I did subconsciously when I was seeking answers. But obviously, reading books, a lot of, for me, because my spiritual awakening was very painful and it was a lot of wounding that I had to work through, I did seek like a lot of inspiration and support. So that was another thing for me. But really just like a lot of spiritual wisdom and just trying to find truth. And whatever resonated with me, I just knew in my heart and soul that was truth.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting what you're saying about seeking truth, because now I'm thinking back to more of my life. Like after that relationship, I had gotten into another relationship that was like 6 years long. And what you're kind of saying about the heart and the mind, and now I think about it, I remember going through a period in that relationship where I felt almost like what you're saying, like asleep in a moment there. And I remember almost feeling, I used to call my sister and be like, Daniela, I'm outside of my body. I feel like I'm going to faint. And she's like, no, you need to get on the ground. You're leaving your body. And I was like, there's no way, that's not possible. And my sister's like, yeah, you need to lay down on the ground and get back into your body, because she's like, you're literally disassociating your soul from your body at this point. And this was after I had like gone through this other relationship and read self books and discovery and had all this new wisdom. And I'll never forget, it's almost like my awakenings were almost like going through these highs and lows in a way. And I remember saying to her like, oh my God, I'm going to pass out. Oh my God, I don't feel like I'm in my body. And she was saying it was like a disassociation from who you are. But there is a reason that happens too. It's almost like a protection. It's almost like keeping you from something in that moment so that you can continue to evolve. So that's like it was almost like an opposite way of having a spiritual awakening.
And I like that you say that though. I like that you say that though, because healing is not linear. Like I just said earlier, it's not like you just have a spiritual awakening and oh, you're enlightened. It's a journey. It's a process. You feel like you're going backwards sometimes. You feel like you're in a lot of pain, and then you have some highs and you have some intuitive hits. And it's literally just learning how I honestly feel like, not enlightenment, I hate the word enlightenment. I feel like, I guess, feeling one with yourself. I think that's really what we should strive for, is feeling connected and one with ourselves. And I feel like in order to do that, you have to have a level of acceptance and also understanding of yourself to learn how to ride the waves of the up and downs, because it's inevitable. You cannot escape discomfort. You cannot escape the lows, because we're here in a physical human body. And that's just the nature here of this earth plane that our soul chose to come into for a reason,
It's very true. And in saying that, like, you can't escape the lows. I think too, when we get more into our spirituality, sometimes we want to stay in those places that feel so, myself, I'm guilty of this too, is like where everything's positive. And I even remember going through that, because me and my sister had very interesting parallel journeys, but they were also very separate and different, and we definitely experienced our stuff differently. And I'll never forget, I tended to be a lot more of the positive person, and she would be going through her negative things. But looking back, and some of the things she brought to me was like, that was a way of me deflecting. And she's totally right. It was like that positive attitude all the time was a way of me deflecting from the negative stuff that needed to be felt at that point in my life. And sometimes I see that with people now, and I'm like, wow, we do sometimes stay in the positive to kind of not have to be in those negative emotions. Who are you barking at? It's a tree.
Guy walking by.
Well, she's so protective. You're channeling Daniela. She's very protective too.
Oh my God.
So it's interesting. Like, I don't think there's one right or wrong way to experience spirituality and to experience your soul evolving, because it's unique to each of us based on our souls, based on the contracts we've made, and based on our perspectives.
But like I said, there are those common themes, because we are ultimately all interconnected at the end of the day.
Right.
So you went, on a deep dive seeking for truth and things like that. So, but how did you get into hypnotherapy?
Well, hypnotherapy was like the last thing I did. It was interesting a lot with, and maybe you could relate to this because of our Cancer risings, a lot of the turning points in my life were always relationships, actually, now that I think about it. The 7-year relationship, that was when I had the first thing with the God and being mad at God. The second relationship of 6 years, and then my boss of 14 years, that was another relationship. And all these relationships created me to go seek further and want more. It was like all these connections to people, again, because people are reflections, right? So they're teaching us about ourselves. And for some reason, I feel like Cancers, maybe we tend to do more based off of other people because we care so much, right? Mm-hmm. So it was not only I wanted to fix myself, I wanted to understand how I could help fix them, which I know is not true. You can't fix anyone. They have to fix themselves. But that drove me into wanting to know more, was how can I help these people in my life? How can I help these people in my life grow and expand? So I think that's really what took me into a deeper dive into hypnosis. And it started with like yoga first, which was more the self-practice. And then after yoga, I got into sound therapy and other healing modalities like meditation. And I wanted to help. I wanted to be of service. And I really wanted to hold space for people. And that's how I got into hypnosis, because it was like either that or therapy. And I had done therapy, and I thought therapy, not that therapy doesn't work, it does. It's a wonderful avenue, and there's great therapists. But for me, it was, as I continued to seek, I wanted to do it quicker and faster. And so I wanted something that would elevate faster than what therapy was doing for me. So hypnotherapy is actually 60% faster rate than regular therapy.
What made you feel like you wanted to elevate faster?
Well, being a Capricorn, come on, and life path 4, mm-hmm. I constantly
very goal oriented Capricorn.
Yeah, and I think in this lifetime the goal was like the self discovery, but how can I be of service? How can I help people? And I really wanted to help people. Animals is my other thing, but in wanting to help people, I was like, there's got to be a better way than just someone constantly. You're talking to them and them constantly just saying, okay, and how do you feel about that? So that's how I got into hypnosis, was like that combination of meditation, which I knew was amazing. It relaxed you, it calmed you. And then hypnosis, which was like therapy, but you're in that theta state where you're relaxed, you're not in fight or flight. And the combination together, and not that some people don't go into fight and flight of hypnosis, they do, but with all the tools I learned with hypnotherapy, it was like, holy shit, with these tools, with breath, with all this, people can get so relaxed that they can tell themselves their own answers and they don't have to listen to it from a therapist. That's like mind blown, because that's like so much more validating. When you hear it from yourself, it's so much more powerful.
Because you feel more grounded in what's true for you.
Yeah. Because someone can tell you something, but if you're not ready to meet that person of what they're telling you, right? If you're not ready to receive it, like how receptible is that going to be? How helpful is that going to be? It's just going to be like you're bouncing that off the wall. So in hypnosis, you are so connected to your soul, less to your ego, and you're so receptive. It's like it's a game changer. It's like you get so much clarity from it. It's so empowering. So yeah. So I'd say about your astrology, how did you get to astrology, and why, and what brought you there?
So another common theme is that it actually came later in my spiritual awakening. Although I did spend a lot of years studying it, it didn't feel like I was studying it. Like I always like naturally just took an interest in it, because I've always been interested in astronomy as well, which astronomy is the study of the actual like celestial bodies in the sky, like the stars and the constellations and anything in the sky and space. I've just always been fascinated with it. Ever since I was a kid, and even today, like I look at the sky and I'm like, oh my God, like I could just stare at it. And so I don't know, I feel like astrology kind of was a part of that, even though I never really understood how it connected to each other. I just took a natural interest to it. And so I guess it was just kind of something that I like to learn about as well. Mine was very heart-based, my spiritual awakening, and just following my heart. And even in times of just feeling lost and I didn't know where to go, I just was like, you know what, I'm just gonna learn. I also love to learn. And it kind of was like I never thought anything of it. It kind of was just like in the back of my mind of like, oh, okay, here and there I'm just going to read about this, or here and there I'm just going to read about this planet. And over time I learned so much, and I never thought about doing anything with it. And then this one day I'm like, this literally, like studying this over the years literally helped me find like my identity back of who I already knew I was, who I already had at one point in my life, but I had lost it just, going through life and trauma and things like that. And it helped me reclaim parts of myself that I had repressed, because astrology is literally, your birth chart is a map of who you are in this lifetime. And I'm very detail oriented. I have a lot of Virgo placements, so I'm very like all about the details and structure and like specifics, and that's how I process things as well, and that's how my brain works. So it's like, for me, it was like a very logical way to wrap my head around all the things that was going on in my life, and the wounding and the trauma that I went through. And it was just like a source of comfort that made me make sense of it all, and also made me make sense of myself. And then once I felt like I had a lot of deep knowledge about that, I was able to see it in others. Mm-hmm. And it gave me a lot more self-awareness, which then gave me a lot more awareness about others and how other people operate. And it honestly opened my heart to more compassion and how other people operate. How do they think? How do they express their emotions? How do they express love? How do they take action and assert themselves? I mean, the list goes on. And I've just been fascinated with it, because it just opened me up to, it just opened up my heart, really, in short,
So how long have you been doing astrology now, would you say?
Probably about like 5 years.
Okay.
Probably like when I had my spiritual awakening.
And what do you think is your favorite thing about it? Like, why are you so passionate about it?
Oh man, there's so many things. I feel like, I just think it's really fascinating how, so although each planet represents how we express in different facets and different areas of our life, I just feel like it's fascinating because it's twofold, right? Like the planets are actually within us. Mm-hmm. It's not as if like the planets, because I went through this whole thing where I was like, oh my God, are we just puppets to the planets? And the planets are just, in the transits are just dictating what we do. But in learning and studying and getting deeper knowledge, I realize it's just us working with the energy of the planets. It's literally just another tool. I just find it fascinating that it's just another one of the infinite languages of the universe that we can use to wrap our heads around, to make sense of things, to be able to just step further into our truth and the truth that we're all one and we're all interconnected. So I know that was really deep. But...
Well, that's beautiful. I love that. Well, all these things are just tools. So, I mean, I think that's something to be said too, is if you're going down this path or you're starting to feel like you're having these spiritual things happening, is from my viewpoint, try different things that you enjoy, because even you said in the beginning you weren't necessarily doing astrology. I wasn't right away doing hypnosis, but it was like the constant seeking and searching and trying things that fit and didn't. And sometimes I even went to things that, like I said, I thought it was something that I liked, or I thought it was something that resonated, and then I did it and I was like, oh no, this is not for me. I don't like it. But it's that whole trying it and seeing, and that's kind of how I think the spiritual path opens. I don't think it's like one thing. I think it's you exploring and seeking and growing through that. So.
It's about self-discovery, because if you're sitting there worried about, well, I'm not going to like this, I'm not going to like that, or this is just going to be a bad experience, you're never going to know, you're never going to learn.
Yeah, you're going to miss out on something amazing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We have to know what we don't like in order to know what we do like. And yes, it's not always a negative thing. Mm-hmm. Like you can go through some experiences and you're like, oh, I don't really like that, and it's not necessarily a bad experience, but it gave you some type of wisdom. And yes, there are those moments where it's like, this was horrible.
It must have been my South Node in Sagittarius, because I literally beat up everything. I'll never forget, I went to yoga when my boss was the one that introduced me. I'll never forget, I got up in the middle of the yoga class and I went running, because the way my mind works is like, this is too boring and slow, I gotta go. And I left. Or even when I went to hypnotherapy school, me and my old roommate, we used to sit in the car and like play like really like crazy like rap music. I don't even like rap music at the time, but I was just so angry I had to show up and go to school because we had to deal with emotional stuff. So it was like I always resisted everything.
And for those of you that don't know, your South Node is literally like the whatever sign you have in your South Node, that means you are a master, you're an expert of that sign. You most likely were that sign in a previous lifetime. And Sagittarius is a mutable energy. It's a fire energy, and mutable meaning it's constantly moving, it's constantly splayed out in many different directions. So this one here constantly has had a lot of experience in trying different things and lots of different experiences, which is a good thing.
But then I get bored too. I'm like, I need to do more things, and that's also like understanding that sometimes you're good with exactly where you are, you know, like
yes,
the trust.
Yes, it is a restless energy, and any mutable sign, so Pisces, Sagittarius, and Gemini, the mutable signs, very restless energies, needs constant stimulations and constant movement. But there's, you know, lower expressions and higher expressions of every sign and every experience in this reality. And we just have to learn how to understand and work with the energy to our benefit, because I believe that everything's working out for our highest good, no matter how
and just like you're
challenging
talking
it
about
is.
Astrology, there's challenges and victories in life, and I think it's with everything. It's like that's the only reason we're actually really here. It's a secret, is to find balance within those things. It's the only reason we came. That's everyone's trying to figure out the mystery of life, but it is a mystery, and it will continue to be. We're only here to grow and expand. Really, that's all.
We have to accept the mystery.
Yeah.
Otherwise, then what?
Well, if we figured it out, we would be so bored. We'd be like, I want to leave,
alone.
you know? Yeah. Like you'd be, it's like with anything, like even when you have a goal, when you accomplish it, you're like, okay, I even forgot about that. Like I'm on to the next thing, because it's really about the journey. It's once you get to the destination, you're like, oh, okay, I'm over this. I've moved on. So should we
So there is no destination.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There's no answer. No.
Oh my God. No, there are. There are answers.
Yeah.
But there is no destination.
Yeah.
I will say that.
Well,
I truly believe that.
You ever heard that thing? We were talking about this the other day. Is like even in my Reiki class, it was like when you think you know, you're like, wow, I have no idea really. I know nothing. It's true. Like when you start to really become more open and evolved and spiritual and into spirituality, you realize that the answers can be infinitive, like to one thing. It's because there's so many different, like what we were talking about, so many perspectives, so many different ways that you can view the world. So things change. That's why science is constantly changing, because they still haven't figured it out.
And science is just, it has its place. And I do think that it's definitely helped humanity in lots of different ways and continues to, but it has its limits. You're literally putting a logical structure on something infinite. You can't structure something that's infinite. But it has its place because we are here on Earth. We need something tangible to wrap our heads around, or else we'd be going crazy on what's what.
Well, that's what you were saying in the beginning, is as human beings, we like tangible things because it holds some type of value for us or something that we can see. So let's get some cards.
Yeah, let's get some cards for the collective energy right now. What does the collective need, spirit, to focus on?
This one's flying out. Ooh, Sarah's third eye opening. Intuition.
I had a reading yesterday and that card came out too.
It's crazy. We're talking about spiritual awakening and intuition, and also I think intuition has a lot to do with, and on the bottom we got fear. Trusting yourselves.
Did you shuffle those?
Yeah. I shuffled. This one flew out, and then this one's on the bottom of the deck.
Oh, hold on. This is definitely
so,
the collective too. Listen.
With your intuition and fears, it's like, right, we all have fear, and fear is the thing that it's always going to come up. It's part of the human experience, and I think this is perfect because this is blending the human experience with the spiritual experience. And that is what really the spiritual awakening is, because what we were talking about, it was being asleep or being in a different place and then waking up to it, the challenges versus the growth. So again, it's the balance of everything. And I think through our fears, I think they're important because we can start to tap more into our intuition by like you have to have the fear, you have to have the challenge to want to seek more. Without it, without these things, without the negative feelings, you don't you get comfortable and you stay there. So without those negative feelings, they actually push you to want to grow and to connect more to your intuition. So
that's really good.
And
this one here, so this is another deck. So there's actually two messages, because one side has an image and one has the actual message, but the image evokes a lot of messages. I feel like this right here, so blue and green, this is heart chakra and throat chakra. And if you see,
that was our colors last week.
Yeah, and this girl here, she's like being held, she's being nurtured here in a cocoon. And actually, this really resonates with what I'm going through right now. But this is I pulled this for the collective, and it says, it's important right now to take a step back and spend some time alone. Hear me out. Hear me out.
Hold on, Nora. Nora doesn't like alone time.
Yeah, that can be tough for some people, being alone. But hear me out. Instead of placing your focus on another, now is the time to give to yourself. Mm-hmm. So this is pretty deep right here. But you know, if you're not alone, think about it. If you're not alone, your focus is not on yourself. You're literally not focusing on yourself. And I mean, it's okay. We need people. We need to be with people that we go pause this.
No, go ahead. Finish. We need to be with people.
We need to be with people. We're humans here on this earth. We weren't meant to be alone. We were meant to be interconnected with people. But we also need our alone time. Because think about if you were constantly with someone 24/7, you're eventually going to lose yourself. Because it's like you're constantly have your focus elsewhere outside of you. And so I feel like this image is also kind of like a testament to that, of nurture yourself. Because there's certain points where it's easy when you're not, you know, when you're with other people and you're not alone, that we can abandon our own selves. And that's where the fear and the pain comes from, is your inner child saying, hey, you're going to leave me for someone else. You're neglecting my actual needs.
Well, and these cards go very well with your card, because what you're saying, here's the fear, right? But how do you connect to your intuition? You have to go and be alone, because otherwise you have external stuff or people. And like Sarah said, it's not a bad thing, but then those people can affect you from connecting to yourself, which is really that inward intuition. And now sometimes needs to be strengthened.
Now, for those of you who feel like you have a really strong sense of autonomy, a real strong sense of self, you know, you probably might not feel that this as much, which is great. But there's always going to be this element that you want to keep in mind, because at the end of the day, we're all put in situations where our boundaries are tested, where our needs are tested. Someone calls you and it's like, oh, hey, let's go do this. And you're like, well, I don't really feel like it, but you know what? I'm just going to do it anyway. That's kind of neglecting your own self. And it's not always a bad thing. It happens here and there. Everything is always meant to be. I believe you're always where you're meant to be. Yeah. You can't miss what's meant for you. But it's also something to keep in mind, and just really honoring yourself. How often are you doing that? How often are you just throwing away your boundaries?
Yeah. Well, and like you said, even if you feel like you're more involved in this, I think too we forget how important space is. It's like we don't think about space in this way. It's like, think about this is the best example I heard someone say. Think about your closet when you have so many clothes in there that you can't even see. This has happened to me because I shoved them all in the closet. You can't even see what you have to wear. And in that moment, all the beautiful pieces, they get misplaced, and you don't even get to see the beauty of them, so you could pick them out to wear them. Think about that in anything.
And if you're a fashionista and you like to go through your closet, you can't shop when you're looking for something to wear, because you're like,
so think about that in your life, in relationships, in situations, in a job. If your whole thing is cluttered, you can't see from a different perspective of what needs to be changed or fixed, or maybe even just allowed to grow on its own without you forcing it.
So it's again that balance, right? That balance between that alone time and spending time with others.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So I think Yes, we need to talk about the wine of the week. So
okay, let's bring in our wine of the week. Da, 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 da. Sento Sere. I don't have an accent. Sarah's got an accent. A beautiful one. She can say it. It's not an animal this week, but this wine we picked because it was organic, which was really nice. We love organic. And then it had a medium body, so we really wanted something because it's super hot here. And red wine could be a little heavy during the summertime. So we wanted something that was a little lighter.
We're in Florida, by the way.
Yeah. Just like if we were in the cold, which is not really cold anywhere right now
No.
in the United States. But if you wanted something a little, it's a medium body, but a little lighter for the summer. And it's nice. It's pretty smooth. It has like a little bit more of a dry, like herby taste to it.
It doesn't have like a syrupy taste.
I mean, I like it. It's nice.
It's nice.
We've been doing our little swirl to open it.
Yeah, let it breathe.
Let it breathe a little. We're having fun with that. So I know we didn't really talk about our wine in the beginning, so that's okay. But next time we might be bringing on some Blue Lotus tea was what we were thinking about doing a little talk.
Yes, we definitely want to talk about Blue Lotus. So stay tuned to the next episode if you want to learn more about what the Egyptians did with Blue Lotus.
Oh yeah. So this was an Italian wine, and I'm giving this one a rating now. I like it. I think it's like an 8. I'm rating it.
I think that's pretty good. I'd say...
You had a better one last night, probably. That's why that other Italian one was really good. But
I'll give it a 7.5.
Okay, I like ratings. They're kind of fun. So we
and we're not sponsoring.
We're not
sponsoring.
Yeah.
Say that we're not. We have no relation to. Although Sento said it. If you want to send us some free wine, that'd be cool too. But
I wish we had their beautiful write up on the wine that guy said about the
oh my god
Sardinia. Or
there was a
something
whole like cheesy romantic story that the cashier
we
read
love
about
to
this.
pick stuff based on signs.
Yes, and just your feeling because it is your
it was
internal
very
GPS.
romantic.
And I love like cheesy romance, and it was literally like some guy took this girl to the Eiffel Tower, and she was like, "Oh, are you from Sardinia?" or something like that, and like I don't know, but yeah.
And if you look up Sardinia, it's supposed to be one of the places with the oldest people in the world because they enjoy wine and pasta and walk, and they have such a community element. So I think that's a beautiful thing too.
The key word is walking.
Walking, yeah, that's what it is.
You can live off pasta and wine, okay? It's possible.
As long as you have the movement in there.
And be happy.
It's because it's healthy. It's not processed.
Drink wine and be happy.
I think that's what it really is. Be happy.
Honestly, yes.
Yeah, happiness.
Happiness is medicine for the soul.
That's so true. Well, anyways, we really appreciate you all being here with us and listening to our spiritual journeys. Definitely was a little bit of vulnerability, but we wanted to share more of really who we are, and I think that was a nice little thing to connect with you guys. So if anyone wants to share anything about their spiritual journey in the comments, we would love to hear, because it's always interesting to know what other people are going through, and having that community to kind of connect with, we will definitely respond.
And if you love to philosophize like me, you can really start to connect the dots that way too, and hearing what other people have to say.
I love that. Well, until next time, we thank you all so very much.
Thank you as always.